Hi, everybody. I'm here with Mark Sage. Mark is the executive director of a group called Area. Why don't you let us know what Area is? This is a little different and maybe not as well known to the people that watch this episode on what Area does and why it exists and what your role is.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jacob. I'm super excited to be here. The AREA stands for Augmented Reality Enterprise Alliance, better known as the AREA. So it's a global membership funded, not-for-profit alliance, and it's helping about accelerating the adoption of enterprise AR. So within that, we have the kind of members that are enterprises actually deploying the technology. So the likes of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, ExxonMobil. We have a group of the providers, both hardware and software. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we have like the platform guys like PTC, Dassault, TeamViewer, but right the way down to startups. On the hardware side, it's been a bit interesting journey, but we certainly have the likes of Magic Leap. We've had a few really interesting new entrants join the area recently as well. And then finally, Jacob, we have the non-commercial organizations, which some of them are end users as well, but within there's kind of universities, government agencies, research institutes, universities, standards organization. So it's a really case of bringing that all together to help everybody successfully deploy the technology.
So it's really bringing an ecosystem together because it's more than just, you can make great hardware or you can have a great end case. But if those things don't mix together with the software, with the regulations, with the fundamental research, things don't tend to move forward. So you're really moving that forward. How big is your organization, or how do you like to, what's some information about Area that would let us know kind of where it fits in the universe?
Well, we're not massive. We're about 50 kind of plus members strong, but it's really about getting into that detail. It's really about helping companies. And we'll probably talk about it as we go through. We've coined the phrase pilot purgatory, where companies have started to use immersive technology. Everyone goes, it's really cool. We love it. It's great. But actually, that's not growing into a full deployment within the organization, which hurts everybody, it hurts the providers of it. So, that tends to be where our focus is how we overcome the barriers to adoption. But there's also a big piece to be played around thought leadership as well, helping business decision makers understand what is this technology? What kind of problems can I solve with it? Most of the time, they like to see other companies that have actually solved problems with it. So we do a lot around case studies. And then the other bit, and I'm sure we'll get into this as well, is around the ROI, the return on investment. So we do a lot on helping that and enabling through kind of our research and ROI calculators that we've created.
Yeah, especially in an enterprise environment, which is what you're focused on, that ROI is really driving a lot of decisions. But before we gloss over enterprise, can you just talk about what enterprise is and why this is compared to consumer or whatever else you would compare it to, and why it makes sense for enterprise AI to have its own, international group like Area?
Yeah, and I think that question often comes with, well, why not VR as well? Why just AR, augmented reality? So there's a few things, Jacob. We find really, and you hear it from most of the big players in the world, that AR is the future. It's the next compute paradigm. Okay. People are going to be able to use this technology in a consumer environment, but, to be doing things that they do now, maybe with their phone, or do things that they're not doing with their phone. But actually, in an enterprise perspective, there are some more challenges when it comes to that. And actually, rather than the mobile space, which I was involved in before, it was very much consumer first and then business and enterprise afterwards. We've certainly seen, and I think there's some reasons for that, things like price point and the different environments, but enterprise has been first. And that may be one of the challenges that we've had, in that, the enterprises are always more difficult to kind of deploy and move quickly. And it's not a mass market. The consumer market is billions and billions of people, where the enterprises are smaller. So we do have that pinpoint focus on the enterprise bit. As the world's moved on, we're over kind of 12 years old. We're seeing more interest in the consumer bit, and we're supportive and love that. That's great. The consumer bit will drive some of the enterprise bit, but historically leading up to this point, it's been a bit more about the enterprises mainly as I say, because the price point and the kind of technology that the devices can actually deliver at this stage.
What are some of the biggest success stories you've seen so far in enterprise use of AR?
Yeah, some of our members, the likes of Boeing, have got an amazing kind of program. Again, we'll probably talk about this a little bit more, but they're very pinpoint focus on the problems that they're solving. And that's a real key point. So they're doing kind of stuff in the wiring side within airplanes and really helping their staff kind of reduce the number of errors that they make. And those errors can create a lot of kind of extra work and delays in their schedules. So likes of Boeing, Lockheed Martin are also famed for doing a bunch of different amazing kind of use cases around the kind of space and satellite bits. But often, Jacob, is going back to the kind of problems. We do a lot of work on the use cases. What are the actual kind of problems that can be solved? So we saw in the COVID times, the remote assist use case absolutely explode, where people couldn't be in the factories or in the kind of environment. So being able to dial somebody and not only speak with them, but actually for them to show you what to do. So the remote assist use case was massive. Maintenance kind of step by step. We see some other really interesting case studies around certainly in like car manufacturing and maybe the electric car kind of maintenance stuff. There's so many different electrical cars, and we're now able to kind of tailor them to what we want, but to actually fix that is a problem. So again, the use of AR to do those kind of use cases. And I think another big one that we're seeing again across industry is the inspection use case. Do you need an external inspector to actually travel to the office and do the checking, or can you use AR to do that remotely? And even internal inspection. So that's another kind of key use case we're seeing growing more and more. I think historically also, and a little bit more on the VR side, the training kind of use case. It's always been a strong one. Can you actually, you can put people in environments that you wouldn't really want to put them in and train them. And my favorite's always the kind of nuclear power station. Do you actually want to do that as a real life experience? Or would it be better if we do that in AR? So
our flight simulators have been around for quite a while.
Indeed,
as a good example, where you don't want people to make mistakes in the real game when they can, simulate it. So you brought ROI up before. You started hinting at ROI, and I know it's a little bit later in the order of, how we anticipated the conversation to go. But let's jump there now. Let's talk about ROI. So you were hinting that, Boeing and Lockheed Martin, they really focus on problems, and those problems that they can solve with AR, that presumably leads to some KPIs, some KPIs that drive a key performance indicator that drives return on investment, ROI, that gets their CFO excited about continuing to invest in AR. So, that's kind of the life cycle. You're trying to solve real problems that drive real financial results so that you can solve more problems with AR. Can you walk me through some examples of ROI you've seen that are that get the financial portions of companies to start paying attention?
Yeah, and there are many. I don't think as an industry we do a good enough job about promoting them, but just to pick a few. And
Here's your chance right now.
I know, yeah.
Everyone now. Here we go.
Here we go. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, a kind of a nice simple one. Newport News Shipbuilding and make those big aircraft carriers. They just used it for simple inspection. So these aircraft carriers take, I think, between 7 and 9 years to build, and they're building kind of individual components and brought together. Now, to inspect those, you obviously have to get someone to go there, and they would have had a piece of paper and said, okay, well, that should be there. Kind of lifting up a piece of paper, trying to visualize it up and down. Not easy. Now they use tablets. Okay, it doesn't always have to be wearables. They're using tablets, and obviously they're overlaying what should have been done onto the real world of what actually.
Right. So they're taking like a digital plan, and that digital plan can be held up, on a tablet over the real finished product, and then the software can detect, wait, that screw doesn't look like it's in the exact right spot or something.
Or something to that. Yeah. It may not be a screw, but it may be something a bit more fundamental. And of course, with those kind of module things, something impacts something else to impact something else. And your thing is, like that. So, it's a nice, simple, but they've moved, trying to get my numbers right here, but it's something like, well, I can't remember the actual hours, but it was a 96% saving on the time it took them to do that, that kind of task, that.
Wow. And I thought the direction, so 96% time savings of hours for inspection is immense. Where I thought you were going to go with it was that the quality went up because you don't have translation errors and human judgment errors that are going to be as prominent in the system. Do you know if that's also true, that the quality has gone up?
It is. The quality has gone up. I think they were focusing very much on that inspection part, which happens at the end. But the same technology can be used all the way through the process, in the build process as well. Nice. But for this particular use case, they were kind of focusing on the inspection part at the last kind of bit. So there's a very clear, again, it's all about solving clear problems. So, when you have to do that inspection task, that's the kind of savings that they were seeing or still continue to see.
Wow. So that's a really big needle mover. And it's interesting because it's in such a, on the one hand, high value product. There's probably not many things in this world you can build that cost more than an aircraft carrier to build, but it's also very important to get it right. And at the same time, it's not like they're looking at millions or thousands or hundreds or even tens of these things. It's very one-off. And so how do you train people on this to do the inspections the right way? So I think that paints a really nice picture. Do you have any other examples of ROIs?
Yeah, I think there's another interesting one when it comes to the I mentioned about the car maintenance. Okay, so again, Bosch are using the combination of the HoloLens and tablets. It's partly about training people as they look at a new kind of electric engine, but that ability to be able to be in the engine, literally in the engine, but having and this is the phrase I like, and I'll probably use it again, so my apologies, but contextual, relevant, up-to-date information. Okay?
Contextual, relevant, up-to-date information. Let's break it down a little bit.
Okay. So the contextual stuff, it's contextual to where you are, that engine that you're in, or that kind of, let's say, that car that you're doing and the component you're looking at. Okay?
Okay.
The relevant part is you want to see exactly what you need to see because you've got a small kind of field of view. You've got your head and your hands in an engine. So, it needs to be relevant. And then up to date kind of answers itself, really. It is the latest information that you have for that. So the flip side of that is how it happens historically is if they've got a problem they're not quite sure about, they'll either come out and look at a piece of paper or go to a tablet somewhere else or go to a computer, taking you away from the task, which obviously delays the time it does. And then you've still got to put it in your mind and conceptually remember what that was to then get your head back into the engine.
Yeah. So this is a great segue to me in the area we really focus on with Face Forward, which is the wearables that go on your face. For the most part, we're talking about smart glasses. We could be talking about VR or visor style. We could also be talking about things like earbuds, but really a lot of what we focus on here is glasses. And when you have your head in an engine and you have your hands occupied, that's probably not the best area for a tablet, right? That's something that you want to have the hardware on your face that can give you the heads up display, can give you the audio cueing, has cameras to know what you're looking at, potentially can light the environment you're in at the same time without using your hands. So when you think from a broader perspective for enterprise AR, you mentioned there's a lot of different types of hardware. We've already talked about tablets. We're talking about glasses. How do you think about the different options with hardware? Is it on a spectrum? Is it application based? How do you sort the different hardware in your mind?
For me, and they could all potentially be relevant, but it's going back to be very clear what the business problem is and what the most effective way of delivering that. So if I can use another example, I'm back with our members at Boeing. One of the things, and again, simple use case, within a fuselage, they have to put, I don't know the term, a widget or something in there that holds the wiring. Okay.
I believe it.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot in there. There's a lot of wire that goes into fuselage, but you have to hold it in there. So they have these different types of widgets. So again, they're using a wearable device to put in a widget, and then the next one may be a different colored or a different type of widget. And I know they're working on the kind of next phase, which is using AI to be able to know that you've put the right one in. But at the moment, it will be color coded and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that goes wrong, obviously there's a massive peel back that needs to be done, and you kind of almost have to start again.
Mm-hmm.
So not great from an ROI perspective. But they want that done as efficiently as possible. So you could do it with a tablet, but you're holding on to that. You're then using one hand to go and get your thing and to put it in and stuff like that. A wearable gives you complete hands-free. And whilst that sounds simple, that is probably, in my eyes, the biggest kind of benefit of these wearable devices is you become completely hands-free. Yeah. So that's, to me, the real. I know it's simple, but it's the clincher in a lot of enterprise use cases. If you can use your hands to do the task that you're supposed to be doing rather than holding on a supplementary piece of kit, I was going to say your quid's in, but your dollar's in.
Yeah. Thank you for Americanizing that reference there. Even though we hope we do have an international group here. So I think that I agree. It seems basic that you get your hands free, but really, AR is meant to provide superhuman capabilities to humans, right? To give that augmented reality overlay. And if you're doing it when you have to occupy their hands, you're giving a superhuman insight, but you're taking away some of the best functions that human has, which are touch and feel and our ability to use our extremities for function. So it does seem to be, if you could wear the devices and get all of the context and keep your hands free, keep your head moving naturally, keep the weight and stuff starts to come into play. But that's where you'd want to go. That gives you that superhuman augmentation without taking away any of your human benefits.
Absolutely. And even simple things by looking away at the tablet and then kind of looking back, that kind of, you have to kind of reset your cognitive load and stuff like that. And then also being able to kind of engage with the tablet. The tablet potentially may be a touch thing and you have to swipe and look around. Whereas with the wearable, again, you can use a variety of different controllers, be it your voice, gaze, or even using your hands. So I think there is, and it's not, I know there's lots of benefits. It's just getting that kind of, that device and the content right to make it easy to use.
And there's a convergence of technologies and form factors. I think the consumer side actually makes great benefits to the enterprise side, because consumer needs to be fashionable and functional at the same time. Enterprise doesn't have quite as big of a concern over the fashion, but it wants to pack more purpose-built function in. So it drives new technologies, whether that's charging technologies like what we do, whether that's processor technologies, display technologies, edge AI, cloud AI. There's all sorts of things that are being driven, and the consumer pull through from smart glasses in the consumer market is just going to provide more opportunity for the enterprise market to piggyback on these, highly powerful, small form factor, high volume technologies that are starting to packed into these glasses.
Yeah, and at the simplest level, I think it will bring awareness. It will drive, oh, wow, so I can do this. Wow, well, can I do this and work?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was my experience. Say, having worked 15 years in the mobile business, it was very quick. They took the kind of problems or the experience they were having and saying, well, we could use this in an enterprise bit. So, it's needed. We've been driving kind of enterprise use cases and the enterprise device types. But you're absolutely right. I think the consumer bit will actually drive a more interesting and wider breadth of problems that can be solved and awareness from the ecosystem.
Yeah, we've seen that in other areas with wireless power. So, for example, we have medical customers and industrial customers that say, wait, my cell phone, my iPhone charges without being plugged in. Why do I have to plug in this $1,200 industrial grade computer? And so you see that pull, you see, we're all humans. We all have phones and we all have other devices. And then you go to your job and you're like, why am I paying more for something that does less than my consumer grade device? So I think that we'll see that hit mass market. But one of the things that you focus on in some of your other interviews I've been watching is this idea of getting some kind of a mass adoption versus just getting stuck with interesting, cool pilots. And you've called it pilot purgatory. Can you talk about what pilot purgatory is and why this is such an important topic to people in enterprise AR?
Yeah, well, pilot purgatory is literally companies buying, let's call it a couple of devices, a handful of devices, handful of software licenses, creating a cool pilot demo experience. And then that is where it's stuck. That doesn't grow into a full deployment across the organization. And
why not? What stops? Like, what are the biggest red flags?
Well, and Jacob, I wish it was kind of easy to say it's one thing. In our experience, there are multiple different factors. I'm not saying that they're all as strong or as bad as each other. Okay, but it's important to kind of understand there's a combination of some kind of business factors, some human factors, some technical factors, and some financial factors. Okay, now, please don't get the impression that it's just a disaster and it's too hard to do it. That's not the case. But
any one of these things could derail a cool pilot from becoming broad deployment.
Correct. Yeah. And I think it's, one of the things that we advocate a lot is when you start to do your pilot is you plan big in terms of you get different parts of the organization in, and perhaps I'll explain those different parts in a second, but you deliver small. So you do a pilot, but you have that clear kind of route to deployment. So going back to, let's talk about the kind of business, some of the business issues, it is around ROI quite often.
Yep.
But also around some of the, the business part tends to be a little bit more, because we've got the financial bit. The business part is about solving a real business problem, which I know sounds strange, but doesn't always happen. Sure. But getting that kind of stakeholder, someone to sponsor it and really support it and almost sell it at the executive level, but also really engage with the end users, making sure that they're totally bought. In fact, some of the best stories I've heard is when they start their project, they actually get the end user to be a critical part, solving problems for them. And actually, they become the biggest advocates of the technology. There's a great story of one company that chose to kind of a 40-year veteran of the kind of shop floor, the biggest tech phobe ever, they said. And it happened to be a he. But once they got him involved and actually solved his problem, he became the biggest advocate of it. So, you have to kind of think about the change management side. So definitely on the business bit, think about the humans. It's a hearts and mind kind of problem, not a let's just put some boxes in or sell some hardware. On the technical side, there are a number of different barriers. And I would have said up to probably 12 months ago, kind of security and a different kind of flavors and elements of security has always been a challenge when deploying at scale, or overcoming pilot purgatory. Now, what do I mean by security? Well, some of it is just about the concern that obviously these devices are taking 3D scans, could be your IP in there. You've got to make sure that that content and data is kept within your organization. But some of that is just as simple as getting the devices onto the network, getting your IT team to make sure that they're happy with the devices. Some companies are concerned they've got cameras on or they've got different kind of components. I have to say with companies like Arbor XR and Manage XR and a few others, and even the kind of device manufacturers themselves, understanding that's a bit more of a challenge. The MDM kind of space is much better than it ever has been. So actually getting devices onto the network, touch wood over here, it's kind of better than it ever was. But also thinking about the safety side, you've now got people potentially walking around in environments, dangerous environments, focusing on the kind of overlay and distractions, walking into walls, walking into pickup trucks, whatever it is, and stuff like that. So that needs to be thought through. And then we kind of touched on it before. The financial side is around the ROI. But I think you need also to be. I think some companies just go, it takes us about this long, and we're now doing it at this kind of length of time, so we're saving this amount of minutes, and just multiply it out and get a number. But actually, there's a whole bunch of other benefits. And one of the things we've done in our research and our ROI calculators is to say that there's a lot more potential benefits you can get from use cases if you just think through the ROI properly and the other bits. Just as simple, and we take one simple example, just the travel, when you go to different sites. But there's a CO2 emission piece. There's the time obviously saved. There's a whole bunch of different things. But yeah, so again, just focusing on some of the business, human, technical, and financial bits. Any one of those, to your really good point, can kind of cause a little bit of a stop in that process. And that's without even the kind of talking about the technology itself, which,
right,
the wearable bit still has a,
that's assuming it all works. That assumes the pilot works.
Yeah, indeed. Which is
its own hurdle. But a lot of people focus on that, especially the early adopters that are trying to bring AR into their enterprise. They're focused on, can it be done? And then there's the questions of, should it be done? If it's done, what benefits will it bring to us? And so it's really a holistic question. So speaking of like holistic viewpoints, and you have a very interesting viewpoint, given that you've been doing this for over a decade and bringing enterprises together. So you see all different sides of this. I'm really curious about the three questions I like to ask every guest. You think you're going to have a very interesting vantage point. So the first question I have is, what's the most overrated feature right now in AR or XR?
Wow. That is a question. You could have given me one on sport or 1980s music. I'm good. Most overrated feature.
Yeah. Like what's not working? What's overrated in AR and XR?
Yeah, I think, and this may sound a bit contradictory, but having a real focus on the whole kind of 3D visualization part, whilst it's great and definitely needed in some use cases, some problems, isn't the be all and end all. Being able to visualize things in 3D has its place and can be useful in some things. But I think devices that just kind of throw that out there and say, "Oh, look what you can do. You can look at the human heart," and this and that. It's like, so what? What problems am I actually solving? And I haven't seen a huge amount of use cases, certainly in the enterprise space, that's using that kind of technology. In the medical space, yeah, definitely, maybe. And again, I'm not discounting all of it, but I think just some starting simple with relevant and contextual information. So that would be one. I could probably think of a few more, but you've got some.
I like that one. That's you're actually, I think we had a recent guest we haven't published yet say something kind of similar. And it's not that the 3D overlays are they're exciting. They're definitely exciting. It's a big deal, and it can be very valuable. It's just that there's so much lower hanging fruit of what you can do with augmented reality and giving superpowers to human operators in enterprise environments. And so it's overrated in the sense that it just sucks all the oxygen out of the room for all the other benefits. Not that it's not a great benefit on its own.
No, you're absolutely right. I think it's a huge wow factor. And don't get me, that is amazing within itself. And we both know companies that have kind of got a huge amount of investment with doing kind of amazing visualizations. But actually, how useful is that when it comes to solving real business problems? It's a thinner slither of kind of problems. So, yeah.
Great. My second question I like to ask every guest is, what's the most underrated metric that actually signals that now is time for adoption?
So and again, I'm back to the measurement of ROI. Okay. I think the slight problem when it comes to this technology, it's about saving money, not making money. And most CEOs are like, "Wow, we need to make more money." My kind of, I want to grow the company and stuff like that, not so much save money. So I think it always starts off on a little bit of a back foot, in that it's not the kind of key measurement that many CEOs are looking at. Or let's be honest, there's different ways of saving money.
Yeah.
But I would say the reduction of mistakes, okay, is a key. Yeah, a lot of people talk about kind of time savings and doing things quicker and stuff like that. But in some industries and some use cases, take for example construction. I know through some of the work we've done in construction, but a lot of projects automatically put 25% extra for kind of mistakes that you have to go and read and things like that. So beginning to claw away at that 25%, making sure that things are doing correct first time, is a huge saving to the company, but not always kind of represented. Companies don't want to admit that they've made mistakes at the end of the day, and they have to do rework. So, I do think there's some really good opportunities. And I know some companies that are basically using that we all know you put extra budget in for rework and stuff like that. If we take some of that budget and reduce that, that gives you the opportunity to do business with us. And I think it's a very interesting and clear model. So I think, an underrated kind of KPI or something we should focus a little bit more is, reducing mistakes within companies.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I love how you put it, especially there at the end. Mistake reduction could certainly be viewed as a cost reducer, but it could also be viewed as certainly a margin expander. But I can also make arguments that reducing mistakes would actually drive more revenue because you could have better throughput, you could produce more, you could then use that extra time that you have in producing things more quickly to reinvest in other R&D that can grow. So I think that I understand what you're saying, that most people view enterprise AR right now as something to cut costs, maybe replace headcount, or maybe to replace senior expertise with more basic operator expertise because they're augmented with machine expertise. But I think it really opens up productivity. Productivity then leads to more innovation. Innovation leads to growth. So I think it can really be a revenue driver as well. My third question here is, what's one misconception from the press or that the public has that you think is wasting the most time?
Another good question. What I like at the moment is the explosion of the AI and AR or XR glasses. Okay, that's
okay.
We're seeing lots of those coming into the marketplace. Kind of think that's great. It's something within the area we're going to focus on a little bit more. But I think sometimes the actual, the solutions are so kind of simple. Mm-hmm. You could do it in multiple different ways. So it's a bit like, use the analogy, I think, with the kind of smart watches. When they first come out, it was just like a kind of a smaller extension of your phone. And that's the kind of use cases and the problems it was solving. And, I feel on some use cases, the kind of simple AI glasses are a little bit of an extension of that. We're just, it's nothing unique, and maybe in a kind of different form factor and delivered in a different way. And that in itself offers some benefit, but it's a little bit of like, okay, we haven't really kind of nailed what is unique and different to us having those kind of AI and AR glasses. So I think that's one bit we need to take through the journey for them to be really successful. Obviously, a lot of companies are focused on the productivity bit. I can now have multiple screens and use my keyboard and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I'm interested to see how far that goes and the kind of situations. And in fact, we're doing a little bit of research now within the area of looking at the VR pass-through use case as well. So yeah, I think that's one little bit this kind of conceptions or the media hyping stuff up. I don't know. I think the other bit.
If we were to summarize that, how would you summarize the punchline on that? What's the misconception that you were highlighting there?
I think it's the AI and XR kind of glasses are a new kind of solve completely new problems and things like that. At the moment, they just seem to be, in my eyes, an extension of what we do at the moment. How we're using our phone, and how we kind of engage with kind of content.
So the misconception would be that consumer smart glasses are not really paradigm shifting hardware. It's similar hardware on a different location, and we haven't yet seen the true breakthroughs that it will enable.
Indeed, yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
I think the other one, and again, this is a slight, concern I have. We've had some amazing kind of hardware brought into the ecosystem, but it tries to do everything. It covers all sorts of different use cases for all sorts of different industries. So it's doing a lot without being kind of a little bit more focused. And what I really mean by that is, if you take the difference between, let's say, a clean room in kind of pharmaceuticals and medical versus kind of maybe a dirty manufacturing kind of line, at the moment, we tend to be using the same kind of devices to do that. And then if we're doing, remote assist in one, and then the other one we're doing step-by-step guides, we're kind of using the same device for those as well. We haven't got, and I think it's an issue a bit to do with the finances and stuff like that. But I do think in the future, as the devices become cheaper, we will see more specific industry and use case or use case devices tailored for that thing. So if you're in a kind of a dirty environment, dangerous environment, then they're going to need to work with PPE and to be very kind of safety related. Whereas if you're in a clean room, it obviously is a different environment. So the conditions, the regulatory viewpoint is different, and what you need to do is potentially different as well. So I believe in the future there'll be a more focus kind of set of both hardware and software solutions on industry and use case that will make it much easier for those companies to pick up and deploy, rather than trying to take something which is a little bit generic and almost fit them into their kind of environments. So
it's interesting. If you use the cell phone analogy, it's like how some places will use iPhones in an industrial environment. They might put a rugged housing on it, but they'll still use an iPhone with some specific application software for their environment. But then others will go to more ruggedized, purpose-built hardware, whether that's like Zebra or Honeywell, Panasonic, companies like that make specific industrial computers. You can't play the same games on it, and you probably can't do TikTok on it, but they don't want it for that on purpose, and they want it to be very ruggedized. So you could see that coming in the space with face-worn wearables as well, where there will be the generic ones that could be ruggedized, or there could be specific application software written on the generic device. But you could also see more purpose-built hardware or application-specific hardware if there are big enough needs and differentiations in the markets.
And I think that's the problem. You can see the vision of that, but does it financially make sense to, let's do one for oil and gas, for example, or manufacturing? But that, I think, feels sometimes we're trying to put, a bit of a round hole into a square peg when it comes to devices. You only get there's a limited choice of devices available at the moment, so you kind of either use that or you're in a waiting kind of game until something else comes out. So
I think the mark, going back to what you started with, I think the volume there might not be nearly as big in oil and gas, but if the problem is big, if the magnitude of the problem being solved is big, you don't need millions of glasses being worn by oil rig operators. You can have a few hundred being worn. If they are going to stop the next Deepwater Horizon incident from happening, for example, it would be well worth it. Then the investment would be high. And so the glasses aren't cheap, but the return on investment that the operators get is massive. So I think ultimately we could probably end the conversation where it started. Being clear about problems is one of your biggest messages you've been driving, because that everything comes from identifying the right problems.
Yeah. And again, sometimes that problem doesn't justify or isn't right for doing AR as well. And that it's often something that comes out. But yeah, I think just being able to, again, being a little bit more specific, you understand the problem, you understand the environment you're in, you understand the workers and the workers' needs, and potential issues with it. You're clear with your stakeholder on the benefits, and some of the challenges that you need to overcome. From a technical perspective, you understand how to get the devices onto the network and manage them appropriately. You've then kind of worked with the safety manager, safety person, to make sure that we've got that, processes in place. There's the right checks that go on. People are kind of well briefed and understand and trained on the devices. And as you kind of start to do that onion thing, either unpeel or add the layers to the onion, then you get a successful project. But if you don't, then any one of those things can break you down. But going back to our kind of the point really was about getting the right devices that support the environment that you're in.
And solve the right problems.
You're absolutely right.
All right. Well, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time and insight. And I'm so confident that the problems will be identified where AR can help in the enterprise setting, and it'll change the way the world operates. And so I appreciate all the work you're doing to pull the industry together. And I wish you nothing but success going forward.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you for the work that you're doing as well, because, kind of a combination of battery, field of view, and weight is a really important kind of triangle when it comes to these wearables. And if you and you are solving that problem, then that's a massive tick. So please keep up the great work.
Thank you. You can't have smart devices without power.
Indeed, you can.
We're here for it. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
Take care.